We're here in CPAC with Bruce Fein, the finest scholar in constitutional law that I have ever met personally. Thank you for doing an interview with The Bottom Line.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I alert the audience whenever I hear effusions, nothing said under oath here, so.
Okay. I've been watching you for at least 30 years do legal and constitutional analysis. My father's a constitutional law professor, and so I've been interested in the subject for a long time. And I was listening to your talk, and I think you made a very important point, which I'd like you to repeat for this interview. As I understood it, the point was that when the government does not follow the law, and you gave many different examples, which I'd like you to elaborate on for our interview, it invites lawlessness from the citizens, and it just destroys the legal system. Why so many presidents don't seem to understand this? Maybe you can explain.
Yes, and I want to give a little bit of background here because that came from the preoccupation with Ed Snowden's actions that at least have led to charges of Espionage Act violations, and it said, well, gee, Mr. Snowden, he can't decide for himself what laws to obey or not. But I think those kinds of fixations, if you will, ignore the larger context in which he acted, which was a reign of government lawlessness. And as Justice Louis Brandeis explained 80 years ago, the government is the potent and omnipresent teacher. It teaches by example. When the government becomes a lawbreaker, it invites every man and woman to become a law unto themselves. And so we have the government in this time and day violating the prohibition upon presidential wars. Congress doesn't have any authorization when we're doing wars in Libya, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, etc. The president flouts the law when he targets Americans for assassinations based upon his say-so alone. He sends us to Guantanamo Bay without any due process. Our charges of criminal wrongdoing for indefinite detention. He decides to suspend the execution of the laws if he doesn't like them, like immigration laws. He doesn't deport people. He doesn't want to enforce the law against torture. He doesn't want to enforce the law against money laundering and marijuana. So he just flouts the Constitution. The Congress of the United States is flouting its obligation to oversee the executive branch's wrongdoing. And there's just huge indifference to all of those instances where the government itself is the lawbreaker. And Ed Snowden wouldn't have had to act if Congress was doing its duty in exposing the NSA's surveillance, which includes gathering telephony metadata, which is the call, the number we're calling from, the number we're calling to, the duration, the date of every phone call any American citizen has made since May of 2006. It's over 8 years. They've collected every single domestic call, every single international call, and they intend to do it forever, even though there's no suspicion that you or those phone numbers has any connection with international terrorism or otherwise. Now, that is a staggering, in my judgment, violation of the Fourth Amendment, and the Congress kept this secret from the American people. It took Ed Snowden to disclose it and spark the conversation that enabled this program to operate today at CPAC. If the NSA had its way, according to their own testimony on oath, they would have kept this secret forever. So we could never have a discussion of what level of surveillance we feel comfortable with.
It's incredible to me that the people that kept it secret, the Senator Feinstein and others, when confronted with this truth, they said they were happy that there would be a debate on this subject. And
at the same time,
they
want a traitor.
They want to put him in jail. Yeah. For doing their job.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he's doing their job, and now what is the gratitude? Instead of giving him part of their paycheck, which they should have done, they want to put him in jail.
Well,
I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, there's a saying in Washington, no good deed goes unpunished. And that's sort of what we have here. We have the members themselves, perhaps the most vitriolic, against Mr. Snowden, convicting him of treason before he's actually been charged or convicted, precisely because he exposed their indolence, he exposed their dishonor, and that's what makes them so angry. And they refuse to say the only reason why they're having oversight hearings today is because of what he did. Now, it's no doubt that we have to be careful about licensing anybody to decide on their own what laws to comply with or not. But we have to understand the background and dynamic. If we want to prevent any future Ed Snowdens, we have to have the government, especially the Congress, doing its constitutional duty and making sure that the government follows the rule of law. If that's true, we don't need to worry about future Ed Snowdens.
Right. Government breaking the law is much more important than an individual breaking the law, because if the government is serving as an example for the rest of the citizens.
Not only that, but they can do so much worse things to you. I mean,
Right.
Ed Snowden doesn't have MX missiles. He can't
Right.
throw you in prison and all these other things. The government of the United States can. And that's why government law breaking is logarithmically more dangerous than an individual law breaking, even if neither of them should be countenanced with ease.
I've noticed that in the last decade at least, maybe farther back, the president can basically do whatever he wants, whether it's constitutional or not. Some people disagree. They take a case to the Supreme Court. It takes so many years. By the time the case is decided, it's too late. He did what he wanted.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening with President Obama now, right? Because he can decide what parts of the Obamacare he wants to apply and which parts he doesn't, and all the other examples that you mentioned. And so somebody wants to bring a case like you do. Well, okay. And how long is that going to take? The Supreme Court, it might take 2 or 3 years or whatever. And so by then, he's already out of office. So what does he care?
I think your observation is a very acute one, and it demonstrates that the courts can only act as what I call speed bumps in the road to ruination and the loss of liberty. If the American people in Congress isn't alert to protect it, no court is ever going to be able to do the job. They're too slow, and they simply lack, the money and the swiftness needed to check executive overreach. And you're exactly right. When I first came to Washington in Watergate days, this is like 1970, 71, worked on the impeachment of Richard Nixon, we basically forced him from office because he believed if the president did it, it was legal. And we said, no, if the president does it, it's not legal. You can't burglarize the psychiatrist of Daniel Ellsberg. You can't obstruct justice. That's impeachable. Now the president does the same thing and worse. People shrug their shoulders. I mean, what's changed? The culture has changed in some sense, in an ironic way. With the disintegration of the Soviet Union in 1991, we became very arrogant and disdainful of our own values. And now we have every day a one-branch government deciding on their own what the law is, and that's not checks and balances, and that's going to lead us to ruination in the next 30 years, if not earlier, unless we change that trajectory.
Yeah, so many of our founding fathers have said essentially, if the citizens are not conscious of their rights and of the
responsibilities,
right, and they're not educated and don't care if other people's individual rights are violated, then the system will deteriorate and it will crumble.
It will not work. Democracy is not self-executing. A constitution and checks and balances are a good starting point, but if the American people are not willing to fight and yield some of their comfort time to being vigilant against government wrongdoing, the whole system will collapse. And I'm very sorry to say that in my view, the system maybe has 30, 40 years more, and if the American people's attitude doesn't change, we will have one branch tyranny, and the democracy that we won at Valley Forge and Cemetery Ridge and Omaha Beach will all have been in vain.
I know one thing for sure, that you've done your part, and you're fighting for freedom and for respect for the law and constitutional principles to be applied in practice. And I can only say that I'm really grateful as another American citizen. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you for the compliment, but I say with all modesty, what I'm doing is really small compared to those at Valley Forge and those 1776. So I appreciate the compliment, but I'm humbled to know exactly where I stand in that pantheon. And let's pay due respect to all of those who sacrificed even more than me. Thank you.
You, like I, prefer to do intellectual battle. And we admire the people that had to put their skin on the line as well.
Both are needed. Both are needed. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the interview.
Okay.